Light has no shadow. This is your dark side. It's the part of your psyche that you disowned. It breathes behind your neck every step of the way, trying to sabotage your every move. It's your worst enemy. The shadow is consisted of all the aspects from your whole that you labeled as bad. You pushed those parts in the dark corners of your psyche, so they became the shadow. Have you seen the movie The Mask? Do you remember Jim Carrey in that movie? A sweet guy that is just kind, good, doesn't step on an ant. But what happens when he puts on the mask? That's the shadow. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the contraries. It all started when you were really young. You might have been loud at a restaurant, and your parents might have yelled at you for being loud. So with your limited perspective as a kid, you thought that being loud means you do not get love from your parents. You felt rejected by your parents, threatened. Being loud from that limited child's perspective meant danger. So you labeled being loud as bad, and you pushed it into the shadow parts of your psyche. The moment you started labeling parts of yourself as good and bad is the moment you started cutting pieces of yourself. It's the exact moment you started losing your power. This fragmentation continued to happen. Fast forward to today. You go by your day and you stumble upon someone being loud, rude. You immediately get irritated, repulsed, triggered. Do you know why? Because this behavior reflects to you your own shadow. It highlights a part within you that you want to stay in the shadows, and you get annoyed by others' freedom to let this part of themselves free. People hide who they really are. Most people are plastic versions of themselves. They are edited, fake, inauthentic, weak in comparison to who they really were as a kid. We suppress our natural urges in order to fit in society, and we believe we are in control of them. But the moment you push something into your unconscious, you are no longer in control of it. Everything you suppress ends up controlling you in ways you cannot even predict. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Think of yourself as a river stream. When you are born, you are one stream, and all the water flows through this one stream. The flow is strong, powerful. But as you start disowning parts of yourself, you start creating multiple streams. With every new stream that branches out from the original one, the flow of the original stream gets weaker and weaker, and all the streams lose their power. The purpose of becoming whole is merging all the streams together again, unifying all the pieces of yourself that you disowned so you can regain your full power. The purpose of conquering the shadow is not to become the parts you disowned, but to merge them with your whole. Not to become perfect, but whole. The shadow pulls you into people and events that will reflect the aspects of yourself you have rejected. That's how your subconscious functions. You think you are in control, but you are aware of less than 10% of the strings that design your life. You know who's aware of that 90%? Your shadow. It plays you like a puppet. It pulls you towards certain people the moment it smells they are a perfect mirror for you. Why it does this? So it can be seen, acknowledged. But the funny thing is, it's hardest to see your own shadow. You would much rather think that fate, life, and the whole world plot some grand plan against you. No, nobody is against you. Your shadow just wants to be seen. It seeks your attention, it operates on its own, and it will pull you around like a puppet until you see it. In order to escape this puppet show, you have to integrate your shadow. Whatever is rejected from the self appears in the world as an event. There were many mythologies throughout history, and they all knew something crucial. They knew that any god or goddess you ignored would eventually turn against you and destroy you. The gods and goddesses from mythologies were most likely symbolical representation for all the parts of our psyche. Any part that you disown within your own psyche will turn against you and eventually destroy you. How? The thing about the shadow is that it can operate on its own, without your awareness. Did it happen to you to explode in anger and tell things you would later regret? That's your shadow taking control over you. There are animalistic mechanisms within us that make sure we survive. There are urges and energies flowing through our being that are capable of terrible things. Dark things. That's just who we are. It's what our vehicle is made out of. That's nature. It's ruthless. But it's fair, because it's ruthless for all. And anything you suppress shows up as your worst enemy. That's why we created a world that reflects exactly the state of our psyche. The shadow is metastasized throughout all systems. For every one tree that we plant, there are 99 trees that we cut down to make paper. And then we write on one of these papers, "Save the environment." One part of the world that we want to highlight is fair. It has equal opportunity for all. It's good, almost heavenly. That's 1% of the world. And the rest of the world is in the shadow. It's where all the ugliness, corruption, crime, and dark things happen. But we want to ignore that. We disown that as part of humanity. And that's exactly what fuels that dark part to be even bigger. This reflects everywhere. 1% of the internet is what you can browse on Google. The 99% is the deep net, where if you can find access to, the greatest ugliness of humanity is shown. 1% of people live a life of extreme wealth. The other 99% are choking in pollution. 1% of the people are celebrities, worshipped for their beauty, talent, and the adversity they overcame. The 99% of the other people's stories, battles, victories are neglected, not even mentioned, diminished. Everyone wants to be like the 1% and get away from the 99%, because everyone cuts 99% of their darkness to appear as the brightest 1% of their being. We have created a world that exactly matches our own twisted situation within our own individual psyche. We proudly wear the 1% of our best and most accepted traits by society as our persona, and the 99% is behind us, unexamined, banished, neglected, rejected. In every story there is a villain and a hero. In your story you are both. And until you integrate your shadow, you will always carry your worst villain with yourself. If you integrate your shadow, the villain, the hero, all the sides vanish. The 1% and the 99% become irrelevant. You become whole. A personal 100% that's not affected by an outside dichotomy. And you reflect this wholeness into the world, with every action, with every thought, even by soul existing. The world outside of us is a reflection of the world within. As above, so below. As within, so without. Your psyche always projects pieces of your shadow upon the world around you. The monsters you hide within will be projected upon other people and reflected back to you. You will fight other people, thinking you are fighting the monsters, but instead you are hurting other human beings because you see your ghosts projected upon them. You are fighting your shadow through others. This is the reason for all the monstrous things we have ever done as humans. We have seen enemies in our fellow brothers and sisters, but all we have looked at was our own shadow's projections. And by trying to fight our shadow out there, we have caused the biggest amount of pain and suffering to each other. When we fought wars, we didn't fight the actual human beings. We fought that enemy we have created in our minds even before the war started. But how did we look to those who survived? We were the evil that burned their homes. So, they fought us. And this goes on and on. We are never really fighting each other. We are fighting the idea we have about each other. And the idea comes from what our shadow projects. Until we end our own civil war within, between the good and the bad, we will fight wars outside of us time and time again, in many different forms. That's why integrating your shadow is the sole biggest thing you can do to make the world a better place. But if you ignore your shadow, it will eventually destroy you. Wherever you go, your shadow is right behind you. There is no escaping the shadow. All light casts a shadow when it hits an object. But there is one thing you can do. Remember what we said in the beginning. Light has no shadow. In order to conquer the shadow, you need to become light. You need to merge both the good and the bad within the nexus of your soul. You need to claim back all the parts of you that you disowned. You need to bring all these parts to your center again, to merge with them and dissolve them as part of you. Once you do this, there will be no objects in your unconscious to cast a shadow. And how to do that? Think about this. Love is at the center of any religion. And what is the function of love really? It's to unite. We all come from love. We all come from unification of two opposites, male and female. Therefore, we are love. This truth is embedded in our soul, and our greatest ability is to unify.